One thing that all of our clients, and in fact, all people have in common, is that we think in metaphors. For example, we say things like, my boss thinks the world revolves around him, or they talk about having a roller coaster of emotions, or they talk about treasuring a memory from childhood. These phrases mean something to us, and that's good news. It means that these metaphors can be used to help our clients to make deep and lasting change. Rather than tell them our metaphors, we can use the ones our clients already think and live by, bringing deep insight into what isn't working and what might work better. Today, we're joined by Andreas, and he's going to demonstrate a powerful methodology called metaphors of movement. First, we'll be diving into what this is, and then you'll see Mark demonstrate this with our friend Jason right here in this presentation. So, Mark, welcome to the summit.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, you are one of the few certified metaphor of movement trainers in the world. Is that correct?
Yeah, I suppose, or endorsed trainer might be the way to put it. Yeah.
Because this was created
I don't
by.
think anyone gets certified.
Okay, right. So, but you are endorsed by Andy himself. Did you get like a stamp on? Did you stamp your wrist or get
A tattoo on the right my shoulder. Yeah.
Did you anesthetize it? Anyway, never mind. So anyway, tell us in your words, what is the metaphors of movement?
Yeah, so metaphors of movement is a process by which we get to elicit the metaphors we're already using, but without our conscious awareness, for our problems or stuck states. So we find out what is the metaphor we're already using for a problem or a stuck state, and use that as insight into a productive place to change, either using your preferred change technology or using the full metaphors of movement process. So often we can access and uncover experiential patterns that we aren't even aware of consciously or wouldn't even know to work with.
Got it. So as an example, a person might say, I'm stuck, and you would do what?
Yeah, so I think we'll get into that a little bit more in depth later, but
okay.
You hear these idioms all the time, I feel stuck, blocked, held back.
Yeah, I keep running into a wall.
I'm slamming my head against a brick wall. I'm going in circles, and it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I'm up to my neck in shit, or I'm slogging through it, or there's just endless metaphors, these idiomatic mini metaphors that people use, and mostly people ignore that and pay attention to all of the other conscious mind communication.
Right. Yeah, it's right there, but they just say, "Oh, that's nothing." I remember seeing a explanation of Erickson working, and then the writer said, "And then he told a story." As if it wasn't important.
Yeah, no, you missed the whole thing.
So let's dive a little deeper. So how does this come into play for a coaching session?
Yeah, so metaphors of movement is especially valuable for finding out where we're starting. So to tell a story, if you wanted to, so in NLP and hypnosis and positive psychology, there's a lot of emphasis on having a well-formed outcome, a clear goal, a vision, something to go towards. And that's obviously really important, but it's not the full picture. So if I just want to get to Hawaii, and I go online and I just buy the first ticket I find to Hawaii, odds of it leaving from my city are really, really low. So metaphors of movement is really useful at finding out, where am I actually starting? Because we all start in really different places, and many of us wish we were starting somewhere else. But we need to know where we are actually starting in order to get the right ticket. So that's beautiful. That's how I see metaphors of movement.
I think that's a really good metaphor for metaphors of movement, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's almost like you thought of that before.
I know. Gosh.
Just wow, that's how good you are. So can you have any examples of that you could just share with us?
Yeah, happy to. So there are lots of examples. So one example, I was working with a client, and at one point, so he was telling me a lot about his problem situation. And at one point he said, I don't want to let my partner down. So there you have one of those little mini metaphors or idioms that usually we ignore that and we pay attention to all of the other communication. Actually, within that little idiom, I don't want to let my partner down, is packed loads of information, often much more than all the rest of the, more conscious mind communication that's happening. So just based on that phrase, I repeated back some things, and it gave me a lot of insight about his situation. So I said, okay, so you don't want to let your partner down. And he nodded. I said, okay, so it sounds like you really want to support your partner. So again, that's the idiomatic phrase that matches that metaphor. And he goes, yeah, yeah. And so I said, and what I know has to be true if you don't want to let him down is that you must be holding him in an elevated position. And he goes, oh, I never really thought about that. But it resonated for him. And I said, okay, so yeah. And so literally as I'm doing this, all I'm picturing is what it would be like if he was literally holding his partner up in this elevated position. And then I'm saying, reflecting back, idioms that are literally true of that scenario. So I said, yeah, so you really want to give him your full support. You don't want to let him down. The only thing is, it's a lot of work for you. And he's like nodding along. And even though you're doing all the work of supporting him, he probably looks down on you from that position. And so here you are, you're looking up to this person, you're doing all the work to support him, and he looks down at you, if he sees you at all. Maybe he doesn't even, maybe he doesn't even see you at all. And much in addition, if he wants to take any steps of his own, he's completely reliant upon you. He needs you to move forward if he's going to make any progress. So he probably blames you anytime you're not making enough progress. So even though you feel like you're giving him your full support and you're holding him in this elevated position, you probably look up to him. He looks down on you and he blames you for anytime you're not making enough progress. You're actually holding him up from making progress of his own. And so, and we went further from there, but that's just a beginning of all the idioms you can start to reflect back. And he's like really nodding along going, whoa, oh my gosh, I didn't realize all of these dynamics that were present. And that's just from that one phrase.
So it sounds to me like you're doing a lot of, I don't want to say mind reading, but yeah, kind of putting interpretations on things that are coming from that one idiom. Are you checking with him along the way to see if it's actually accurate?
That's an interesting question. So a lot of people do experience it as if it's mind reading. Like one client I worked with, I didn't get any background information because I wanted to kind of test this stuff out. I just got the metaphor and reflected back what was literally true of the metaphor. And he said, are you clairvoyant or something? Like, how do you know all of this? And the truth is, I didn't really know much of anything. I just was reflecting back what was literally true. So with the metaphors process, as long as we're reflecting back what's literally true of that metaphorical experience, it's going to match somebody's experience. So I'm not actually asking questions. I'm just saying what's true. And that's part of the power of the process, is that people feel incredibly understood in a way that perhaps nobody has up until that point, including themselves often.
Oh, that's really cool. I think, if you don't mind, I think it might be a really good time to go to the demonstration.
Yeah,
We're going to bring in, because to see this in action, I think is going to be better than any explanation could possibly be.
sure.
So if you would be all right with it, let's get started. We're going to do a little demonstration with our friend Jason. So he's going to come in, and Jason, if you're there, if you would turn your camera on and join us here. So
I am here.
Good.
Right.
So I'm just going to step back and turn this over to you, Mark. I'll turn my camera off and mute myself, and you can
Okay, great. Sounds good.
show us what you
And
do with Jason. Thanks.
I'd
Yeah.
invite, as I do this demo too, for those of you watching and listening, feel free to go along for the ride, so to speak, with your own experience as well. So Jason, in a moment, I'll invite you to think about some problem situation where you feel stuck, blocked, held back, stuck in a rut, something like that. And I'll share a quick example of one of my own before I ask you. So this was a situation, somebody asked me, okay, so what's it like? And okay, what's it like? I hadn't really thought about that. And the first thing I was aware of was I didn't feel grounded. It was almost like I felt up in the air a little bit. So I said, well, it's almost like I don't have my feet on the ground. It's like I've got 6 inches between me and the ground. So they said, okay, so tell me more. What's it like? And I said, okay, well, this is kind of weird, but it's almost like there's a rope growing out of the top of my head that I'm hanging by, and that's why I'm not grounded. And then I noticed, well, this is even weirder. It's like there's these 6-inch spikes underneath me. Um, so I like to share this example in introductions because it's a great example of how what it's like, the metaphorical experience is often weird and out there and can be pretty intense sounding as well. And so to our left brain, logical, rational mind goes, oh my God, that's really weird. Like, what is that? Like a rope growing out of the top of the head? But to our right brain, that's just what it's like. It's unfiltered, just this primary process experience that's unfiltered for what's culturally acceptable. So as Jason, as I guide you and those of you going along for the experience, I invite you to just notice what it's like. It may be weird. Often it is. So that's what it was like for me. Rope growing out of the top of my head, hanging 6-inch spikes underneath. So Jason, I invite you to think about, maybe you've thought of some area where you feel stuck, blocked, held back. And so the whole thing, the whole situation, what is it like?
Well, the situation is that I have an interest in having a biological family as well as
Okay,
possibly,
so I'll just interrupt you there.
yep.
And so often people share what we're used to asking about. So
Mm,
kind of an example of the problem. So in this case, I'm not looking for an example, just the whole thing. What's it
mm.
like?
Okay, you don't need to know the topic, just the
Right.
metaphor. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like I am driving a car in a race,
Uh,
and I'm almost like I only have a quarter tank of gas left.
Okay. Driving a car in a race and you got a quarter tank of gas.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Anything more about what that's like for you?
Yeah, there's a quality to the where I'm not sure I want to continue driving on that race. I may want to focus on other
Mhm.
things.
Yeah. Is it a racetrack or a road or
I think it's a road.
a road? Okay, great. Okay, great. So let's just start with this. There's a lot more that we can gather about the metaphorical experience,
Mm,
but even just with this, just hearing that
Let's
initial.
let's say it's driving to a destination, not a race. I don't think it's a race. It's a
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, great. So now we're getting more clarity on the
yeah.
metaphorical experience. So you've got a quarter tank left and you're driving to a destination. Not sure you want to stay on that path or that road. Okay, great.
Mm,
So just knowing that much, let's see what I can reflect back just in terms of what's literally true of the experience. So so basically you have a certain vehicle to get to a destination, and there's a path laid out before you. There's a road that's been built. Other people have traveled this way before, so you know this is a place that others people have gone and found it worthwhile to get to. And plenty of people have gone this way before you. Plenty will come after you. You're still wondering if it's still the path you want to go down, but you have a vehicle to get there. Now, if you do want to continue down this path, you're going to have to probably tank up again at some point fairly soon. You've got some gas left, so you can continue a little bit with what you've already got. But at some point, you're going to have to pull over and gas up and fuel up for the journey if you want to keep going and reaching this particular destination. The other thing is that you're in the driver's seat, so you're controlling this vehicle, and at the same time, it's the vehicle that's carrying you along. So this is something that you're relying upon for your support, and to carry you to this destination. It can go a lot faster than you can. However, it does require a certain fuel to be able to take you where you want to go. And so If you run out of fuel and you don't have a way of gassing up, then you're going to be stuck. And then it's going to be a matter of, do you get out and start taking steps of your own or not? So when we have a vehicle to carry us, we can get places a lot faster. And at the same time, it prevents us from taking our own steps. And sometimes we're not quite as grounded as we might be if we were just taking our own steps, even if that would get us there more slowly. So there we go. There's just a little beginning. So maybe, Jason, I'm curious if you want to share anything about your experience, just hearing me reflect back that.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Because what I was talking about was the desire of having a family I'm 46 years old, and so even if I met someone tomorrow, I wouldn't have one until I'm close to 50, right? Most likely, closer to 50. And so the idea of like, oh, I could just fuel up, I could design my life so that I do have enough energy to raise a kid. I hadn't thought about that. And I hadn't thought about a vehicle. Like what would a vehicle look like? I have to think about that some more. I'm not sure. That's because that's a metaphor in itself, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then the reminder that I'm in the driver's seat, that I'm relating to this as something that's happening to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's probably other metaphors I can come up with around. It's not a matter of, because I've studied sleight of mouth too. Like it's not a matter of whether I reach a certain destination by a certain age. It's more of, is the drive worth it? Do I actually enjoy driving?
Yeah.
Like yeah.
Yeah, so you likely could get there if there's a way of gassing up. Then that's another whole question, what you brought up of, do you want to even get there or not?
It's a good question, yeah. Because I often think about like, oh, what's it going to be like if I'm an old parent, and then I'm around other younger parents? That would be weird for my kid. And so it's an interesting metaphor to think about and relate everything to. It moves my thinking to think of things I wouldn't have thought of before.
Yeah. And so, these are, and maybe this is enough. I know we have a limited time here, but just to give folks a hint of the full metaphors of movement process would then involve also eliciting the whole landscape more fully. So we know that there's a road here, but we don't have a full picture of what's to the left, to the right, what kind of road, what's behind. And that will bring in even more idioms and more of these insights about the dynamics of the situation that you find yourself in and what your different choices might be within that. And like, as you said, things that you may actually have more control over than it feels like sometimes.
It's true. Yeah. When I think about my own childhood, it's not that I am grateful that I got to the end. It's like I remember the things we did, the side tracks we took, the trips to the Jersey Shore and the theme parks, and it's what we did when we were moving forward, not how fast or how well we moved forward.
Totally. Awesome. And just to throw it out there, my youngest brother, my dad was 50 when my youngest brother was born, and worked out well for him. So
nice. That's encouraging. Nice.
So
let's bring Doug back.
Say again.
We should bring Doug back.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Thank you. Yeah, and so often people find that even just finding out what the metaphor is before reflecting back any of these idioms in itself can be insightful and help make new connections automatically. And then with the repeating back of these idioms, what's literally true, it brings out further awarenesses of dynamics that, like, oh, right, I am in the driver's seat, different things that often people aren't aware of until hearing those reflected back.
That was just really cool. I really enjoyed that. So I'm very curious though, is this something that you do for the entire session? Is the whole session like you get the bigger landscape, and is the whole session metaphor, or do you then bring it back to specific situations, like, his wanting to have a biological family sort of thing?
So no, the whole session's metaphor. So this last bit where if I was in an actual session, I'd interrupt and, oh, not interested in the situation. Tell me more about what it's like, because
Oh,
the more you stay within the metaphor, the easier it is to stay within the metaphor. And the more you go down that more logical left brain, then the
mhm.
easier it is to get out of the metaphorical experience. So yeah, we would stay, if it was a full session, we'd stay within metaphor the whole time. But there's a lot more layers and things that we can decode from the metaphors. There's like layer upon layer that we can decode. For example, um, being in a container of some sort, like a car, it's a container around us. That means certain things, and that tells me certain things about that experience. It's something we go into full depth in the training, but basically it's a situation where you had no control over it. It's there are these lots of life situations where it wasn't our choice and we just have to deal with it in some way. And so there's a lot of other things we can decode from these metaphors that we go into in the full trainings.
That's so interesting. So,
And I'll just add really
oh,
quickly,
yeah.
what I wanted to emphasize too for this talk is that even if you don't do that whole full training in the whole metaphors and movement process, just from what I demonstrated today, you can use your preferred change modality with whatever you discover. And there's yeah, a lot of examples of people who one person came to my intro and she's like, I didn't know what to do after that, so I just did this other process and it was amazing. And it was really useful because I wasn't even aware of that being a problem until the metaphor got elicited.
Oh, that's great. Gosh, I wish we had more time. I know last time we were on a summit together a year ago, whatever, and I watched you do your presentation on metaphors of movement, and you used that whiteboard there behind you a bit, didn't you? You often draw.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I have a whole group sharing metaphors, then I'll draw up a bunch of them and then give the idioms for those.
I see.
Like one I remember, just to throw out a couple more examples because these can be useful. Somebody said, it's like I'm on fire. And so I said, okay, so you're a real source of illumination for others, but it's burning you out. And he was like, oh my God, that is so true.
That's great.
And so just to be able to know things, like I know that's going to be true of his experience because of the metaphor. Or somebody else said, it's like I'm sitting under a tree and the tree is strangling me. And so I said, okay, so you're taking shelter. This seemed like a natural place to take shelter, and now it's at risk of killing you. And she was like, yes, absolutely. And turns out it was a relationship that went bad. So it's just amazing the kind of things we can deliver that we know is going to absolutely match somebody's experience without having any content.
God, there's so many questions I could ask you right now. It's frustrating to not have like hours with you asking questions. But I'm gonna stop myself and just say, wow, there's so much here. And I wish I could do more. That seems like really powerful technology. And I hear you have a free gift you're going to offer to our summit attendees. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So it's a 2-page, so 5-step process for how you can elicit a metaphor, one of these experiential metaphors, the metaphors we're already using for problems or stuck states, but may not be aware of consciously. So it's a 5-step process for doing that, because sometimes somebody just comes out with a metaphor, in which case you can just go into some of the stuff I've demonstrated today. And of course, the full trainings about that. But other times you might want to find out or elicit what the metaphor is, even if somebody's not giving it to you right off the bat. So it's a 5-step process for how to do that. If somebody is starting out by giving what most people are used to giving, which is either an example of the problem, consequences of the problem, how it makes them feel, or a diagnosis. So a 5-step process for eliciting the metaphor.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
That's
you can check
fantastic.
it out. My understanding is you click the link below this video and and you can get a hold of that.
And if it's not right below the video, it's around here somewhere. You can
Around
find
here
it, I
somewhere.
promise.
Look around.
It'll be there. And just one last thing, you keep referring to the whole training. What is the whole training? How long does it take to?
Yeah. So I teach it. The next one that I'm teaching is in January. So if you go to andreasnlp.com and click on the tab for Metaphors of Movement, the level 1 is in January, and then level 2's a couple months later. So level 1 training is the equivalent of 2 days, but it's 4 half days in the mornings. So people can do that from more easily from different continents. Same thing for level 2. It's also 4 half days. So you can check it all out there. And the other thing, maybe just in summary, for this, what I hope you gain from this talk is that this metaphor, listening to the metaphors people already use, can, number one, give you incredible insight into somebody's experience. Then number two, it can be an incredible rapport experience when somebody has somebody else reflect back these idioms that are literally matching their experience. Often people feel understood in a way, as I said before, that's just never happened before. And then number three, a really useful way of accessing juicy material to work with that you wouldn't even necessarily know to work with without the metaphor. And there's a great example of one of those in that free gift as well.
That's beautiful. Mark, Andreas, thank you so much for being here. This has been fantastic, and I look forward to hearing more about it sometime soon. I might want to take one of those trainings. You might find me darkening your doorstep at one of those.
Excellent. Yes. Wonderful, ominous metaphor there. Great. We'll look forward to it. And thanks again, Jason, for volunteering.
My pleasure. That was great for me too, as that's an area where I've been thinking about it for a lot of time, and it's helpful to hear you use the metaphor and to give me new ways of processing it. So thank you.
Awesome. Very welcome.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Hey, it's Mark again. I just wanted to mention that this material is all developed by Andrew T. Austin from the UK. And you can find out about his work at metaphorsofmovement.co.uk. I'm one of the approved trainers and been just privileged enough to be working with him and learning this material as he developed it since 2009.